Dr. Blue stood before the massive holographic display, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with a mix of frustration and worry. The strange artifact floating in the containment chamber below had resisted every attempt at analysis for the past 3 months. Her tail twitched nervously as she watched the energy readings climb higher for the 4th time that day. "Run the quantum analysis again," she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of someone who knew they were asking for the impossible. The other scientists in the Galactic Council's Advanced Research Facility shuffled uncomfortably. They had already run this test 16 times today. The artifact, a spherical structure roughly the size of a small shuttle, hung suspended in the chamber's gravity field. Its metallic surface was covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. What had started as a fascinating archaeological discovery was now threatening to destabilize the entire Proxima Beta star system. "Doctor," called out one of her assistants, his antennae drooping with exhaustion. The energy signature just increased by another 12%. "At this rate, the containment field won't hold for more than 2 weeks." Dr. Blue's skin flashed a deep purple, a sign of deep distress among her people, the Luminians. She had earned her position as the Council's leading scientist by solving problems that stumped others. But this was different. The artifact had been discovered buried deep within an asteroid belt, clearly created by a civilization far older than any known to the Council. At first, it had seemed dormant. Then, 3 months ago, it had suddenly activated, releasing pulses of energy that grew stronger with each passing day. These energy waves were now threatening to destabilize the local space-time fabric. "Show me the historical data again," she requested, her fingers dancing through the holographic interface. Numbers and charts filled the air around her. The most advanced sensors in known space had been aimed at this object. They had tried everything from quantum resonance scanning to temporal analysis. Nothing had revealed its secrets. Dr. Blue watched as another team of scientists approached the artifact with their instruments. The object hummed softly, its surface rippling like water. Every time they thought they understood one aspect of it, the artifact would shift, presenting new patterns, new puzzles. "Doctor," called the facility's director from the doorway, his robotic eyes adjusting as he entered the room. "The Council is demanding answers. They're talking about moving the artifact to deep space and detonating it." "That would be a mistake," Dr. Blue replied, her skin pulsing with determination. "The energy readings suggest it could take out half the sector if we try to destroy it. There has to be another way." She turned back to the display, studying the artifact's surface patterns for the 1,000th time. Something about them seemed almost familiar, not to her scientific knowledge, but to something more basic, more fundamental. Then she remembered something she had once seen during a visit to a primitive world called Earth. It had been a simple mechanical device, a child's toy called a puzzle box. The solution hadn't required advanced technology, just understanding the right sequence of physical movements. Her skin brightened with sudden inspiration. What if we're approaching this all wrong? She wondered aloud. We've been trying to analyze it with our most advanced technology, but what if the solution requires a different kind of thinking? The director looked at her skeptically. "What are you suggesting?" "I want to bring in a human," she said, her voice firm despite the gasps from her fellow scientists. "Specifically, an engineer who specializes in mechanical systems." "A human," the director scoffed. "They barely have interstellar travel. What could they possibly understand that our best minds cannot?" Dr. Blue's skin rippled with colors of certainty. "They think differently than we do. They still work with their hands, solve problems without advanced computers. Maybe that's exactly what we need. Someone who understands basic mechanical principles, someone who can see patterns we might miss because we're too focused on complex solutions." The director stared at her for a long moment before sighing. "The Council won't like this." "The Council," Dr. Blue replied, watching as the artifact pulsed with another surge of energy, "is running out of options." Jack wiped the grease from his hands and looked up at the rusted factory machinery he had just fixed. The old cotton mill's owners had called him their last hope after 5 other engineers had failed to repair the ancient equipment. It had taken him 3 days, but he had gotten the century-old mechanisms working again. As he packed his worn toolbox, a strange light filled the factory floor. Jack turned around to find himself face to face with a tall, blue-skinned alien whose body seemed to glow with shifting colors. He blinked twice, then looked down at his coffee thermos, wondering if someone had slipped something into it. "Are you Jack Thompson, the maintenance engineer?" the alien asked in perfect English. Yeah," Jack replied, surprisingly calm for someone meeting an alien for the first time. "Though most people just call me the fix-it guy." Dr. Blue's skin rippled with interest as she studied the human before her. He wasn't what she had expected. His clothes were stained with oil, his boots were scuffed, and his toolbox looked like it had survived several wars. But his eyes had a sharp, intelligent look that caught her attention. "I represent the Galactic Council," she said. "We need your help with a rather urgent problem." Jack raised an eyebrow. "The Galactic what now?" 20 minutes later, after a brief explanation and proof that this wasn't an elaborate prank, Jack found himself aboard a ship traveling faster than light. He sat in a comfortable chair, still holding his toolbox, while Dr. Blue showed him holographic images of the artifact. "So let me get this straight," he said, scratching his chin. "You folks have technology that can bend space-time, but you can't figure out what this thing does." "Our most advanced analysis methods have failed," Dr. Blue admitted, her skin showing hints of embarrassment. "We've tried everything in our power to understand it. Everything except asking someone who fixes old machines for a living," Jack said with a slight smile. The ship arrived at the research facility, where Jack received quite a welcome. Dozens of alien scientists stared at him, their expressions ranging from curiosity to obvious disappointment. He heard whispers as he walked by, carrying his battered toolbox. "This is what you brought us," one senior scientist asked Dr. Blue. "He doesn't even have a proper scanning device." Jack ignored the comments, his attention focused on the massive artifact floating in the containment chamber. His eyes narrowed as he studied its surface, noting the way the patterns shifted and moved. "Can I get closer to it?" he asked. Dr. Blue's skin flashed with alarm. "Our safety protocols require—" "That's your first problem right there," Jack interrupted, pulling a simple wrench from his toolbox. "You can't understand a machine by just looking at it through screens. You need to get up close, listen to it, feel how it works." The alien scientists watched in horror as Jack approached the containment field. Dr. Blue, despite her initial hesitation, found herself fascinated by his confident approach. He moved like someone who had done this countless times before, though surely he had never encountered anything like this. "Interesting," he muttered, tapping the wrench against his palm. "The patterns aren't random. They're moving in sequence, like the gears in an old clock." "We've analyzed those patterns for months," one scientist protested. "They're clearly beyond human comprehension." Jack turned to face them, a knowing look in his eyes. "Sometimes the most complicated problems have the simplest solutions. You've been looking at this thing like it's some kind of super advanced technology. But what if it's just a really well-made machine?" Dr. Blue moved closer, her curiosity overtaking her skepticism. "What do you mean?" "Well," Jack said, pulling out a small flashlight from his pocket, "let me show you something I noticed right away that all your fancy scanners missed." The alien scientists gathered around, their initial dismissal turning to reluctant interest as the simple human engineer prepared to share his observations. Dr. Blue's skin pulsed with a mix of hope and anticipation. Perhaps bringing this human hadn't been such a crazy idea after all. Jack swept his flashlight beam across the artifact's surface, moving with the careful precision of someone who had spent years examining old machinery. The alien scientists watched nervously as he worked, their advanced sensors and tablets forgotten in their hands. "Look here," he said, pointing to a section of the metallic surface. "See these marks? They're wear patterns." Dr. Blue leaned closer, her bioluminescent skin brightening with interest. "Wear patterns. Yep. When machine parts rub against each other over time, they leave traces, like reading a story written in metal. Jack ran his fingers along the surface, feeling the slight variations. These aren't random scratches. They're signs of regular movement. One of the senior scientists scoffed. Impossible. Our scans would have detected any mechanical components. Would they? Jack asked, not taking his eyes off the artifact. You're looking for advanced technology. But what if this thing is purely mechanical? No electronics, no quantum whatever, just really precisely engineered parts. He pulled an old stethoscope from his toolbox. The alien scientists exchanged confused looks as he pressed it against different sections of the artifact's surface. Dr. Blue watched, fascinated, as Jack closed his eyes and listened intently. "There's something moving inside," he said after a few minutes. "Lot of somethings, actually. Moving in sequence, like a giant clock or music box." But the energy readings, another scientist started to protest. "Could be a byproduct," Jack interrupted. "Like heat from an engine. You're so focused on the energy that you're missing the machine producing it." Dr. Blue's skin pulsed with excitement as she began to understand. "The patterns we've been studying, they're not just decorative." "Nope." Jack pulled out a piece of chalk and started sketching on the floor. "They're instructions. See how they flow. It's like an old-fashioned user manual, showing you where to push, pull, or turn." The alien scientists gathered around his rough drawings. Jack had mapped out the pattern flow, showing how certain sections of the artifact's surface seemed to correspond with others. It was surprisingly simple when laid out this way. But why would an advanced civilization create something so basic? One of the younger scientists asked. "Reliability," Jack said, standing up and dusting off his knees. "Look, I've fixed machines from the 1800s that still work perfectly because they're all mechanical. No computers to fail, no power sources to die. Just good old-fashioned gears and levers." Dr. Blue's skin flickered with sudden understanding. A civilization advanced enough to build something this complex might want it to last practically forever, Jack finished. And what's more reliable than mechanical systems? They work the same way every time, as long as the parts aren't damaged. He walked around the artifact again, this time with more purpose. "That energy signature you're worried about, I bet it's a warning system, like a pressure release valve whistling on an old boiler. It's telling you that something needs to be done." The other scientists began muttering among themselves, but Dr. Blue moved closer to Jack. "What do you suggest?" "Well," he said, pulling a small mirror from his toolbox, "first we need to read the rest of the manual. These patterns change when viewed from different angles, right? That's because you're supposed to look at them in a specific sequence." He positioned the mirror carefully, reflecting light onto a particular section of the artifact. The patterns shifted, becoming clearer, more distinct. Dr. Blue's skin glowed brighter as she saw familiar mathematical sequences emerge. "It's not just showing us what to do," she whispered. "It's teaching us how to understand it." Jack nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Sometimes the best way to preserve knowledge is to make people work for it a little. Whoever built this thing wanted to make sure that only someone who took the time to really study it could figure it out. The alien scientists watched in amazement as Jack continued his methodical examination, using nothing more complex than mirrors, chalk, and his own careful observations. Dr. Blue felt a growing respect for this human who saw so clearly what their advanced technology had missed. "Ready to try something interesting?" Jack asked, reaching for his wrench again. "Everyone stands back," Jack said, positioning himself near what he believed was the artifact's first access point. Dr. Blue's skin flickered with nervous energy as she watched him raise his wrench. "You're not going to hit it, are you?" she asked, trying to hide her alarm. Jack chuckled. "No, but sometimes you need to give these old mechanisms a gentle touch." He placed the wrench carefully against a slightly worn section of the surface and applied steady pressure. A deep, resonating hum filled the chamber. The alien scientists held their breath as the artifact's patterns began shifting more rapidly. Several reached for their emergency containment controls, but Dr. Blue waved them down. She had begun to trust this human's instincts. "Watch this," Jack said, moving the wrench in a slow, clockwise motion. A series of clicks echoed through the chamber, and a section of the artifact's surface began to rotate. "It's just like an old bank vault. You need to hit the right sequence of movements." Dr. Blue moved closer, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. "How did you know where to start?" "The wear patterns told me," Jack explained, maintaining steady pressure. "See these marks here? They're slightly deeper than the others. This spot has been used more often, probably because it's the beginning of the sequence." A loud click resonated through the chamber, and a small section of the artifact's surface slid open. Instead of advanced technology, they saw a complex array of gears and mechanical linkages, all crafted from materials that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. "Beautiful," Jack whispered, studying the intricate mechanisms. "Whoever built this was a master craftsman. Look at the precision of these gear teeth." One of the senior scientists scanned the exposed section. "But there's no power source, no energy matrix. How can it?" "It's all mechanical energy," Jack interrupted, his eyes following the movement of the gears. "Like a wind-up watch, but on a massive scale. The motion of one part powers the next, which powers the next, and so on. The energy signature you're detecting. It's just friction from all these parts moving together." Dr. Blue's skin pulsed with excitement as she began to understand. "So the increasing energy readings mean this thing is winding up for something," Jack finished. "And by the feel of it, we need to complete the startup sequence soon, or all this stored mechanical energy might tear it apart." He moved to another section of the artifact, his trained eyes spotting another worn access point. "These patterns aren't just decoration. They're a maintenance manual. Look here." He pointed to a series of flowing lines. "This shows the correct sequence of movements. It's like dance steps for mechanics." The alien scientists watched in amazement as Jack worked his way around the artifact, using simple tools to activate complex mechanisms. Each successful movement revealed more of the internal workings, all purely mechanical yet more precise than any machine they had ever seen. Dr. Blue found herself acting as Jack's assistant, holding his flashlight or helping to spot pattern sequences. Her initial skepticism had transformed into genuine admiration for the human's understanding of mechanical principles. "You know what this reminds me of?" Jack said as he worked. "Old lighthouse mechanisms. They needed to be reliable for decades with minimal maintenance. This is the same principle, just scaled up to an astronomical level." Another section of the artifact opened, revealing a cascade of spinning gears and rotating cams. The humming grew louder, but now it felt more harmonious, less threatening. "We're getting close," Jack said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Each section we activate helps stabilize the others. It's like tuning a giant musical instrument." Dr. Blue noticed that the energy readings, which had been climbing dangerously for months, were beginning to stabilize. "The threat level is decreasing," she announced, causing excited murmurs among the other scientists. Jack nodded, focusing on the next sequence. "That's because we're doing what it wants. We're not fighting against the mechanism. We're working with it." He paused, studying the next set of patterns carefully. "Now comes the tricky part. We need to synchronize all these sections we've opened. One wrong move, and we might have to start over." The chamber fell silent except for the rhythmic humming of the artifact. Everyone watched as Jack prepared for the next crucial step, his confident handling of simple tools accomplishing what months of advanced technology had failed to do. The artifact's humming had changed to a deep, rhythmic pulse that reminded Jack of the old steam engines he used to repair. He stood before the opened sections, carefully timing the movements of various gears and mechanisms. "Dr. Blue," he called, not taking his eyes off the spinning parts, "I need you to be my second set of hands." Her skin flickered with surprise and honor. "What should I do?" "Watch this gear assembly here," he said, pointing to a complex set of interlocking wheels. "When I give the signal, turn that brass-colored lever exactly 1/4 turn to the right. Timing is everything." The other scientists crowded around their monitoring equipment, but Jack shook his head. "No offense, folks, but right now we need to use our eyes and ears, not computers. This is all about feel and timing." He pulled an old pocket watch from his toolbox, making Dr. Blue's antennae twitch with curiosity. "Why do you need that when we have atomic time measurers?" "Because this watch is mechanical, just like our friend here," Jack explained, listening to its steady tick. "Sometimes you need to think like the machine you're working with." He began counting under his breath, watching the interaction of various components. The artifact's surface patterns were moving faster now, but in a more organized way than before. "You know," Jack said while working, "this reminds me of something I learned fixing old music boxes. The most complex tunes came from the simplest principles, pins hitting tune teeth in the right order at the right time." Dr. Blue watched in fascination as he synchronized his movements with the artifact's rhythm. "But this is far more complex than a music box. Bigger, sure. More parts, definitely. But the basic principle is the same." Jack adjusted his position slightly. "That's what makes mechanical systems so brilliant. Scale them up or down, the rules stay the same." He held up his hand, signaling Dr. Blue to get ready. The ancients who built this knew what they were doing. They didn't use computers or quantum mechanics because those things can fail. But gears and levers, they'll work forever as long as they're maintained properly. "Now," Jack called. Dr. Blue turned the lever exactly as instructed. A harmonious click echoed through the chamber, and several gear assemblies suddenly aligned. The artifact's humming changed pitch, becoming smoother, more stable. "Perfect," Jack exclaimed. "See how the patterns are flowing now. They're not random anymore. They're showing us the next step." One of the senior scientists approached, his skepticism finally wavering. "How can you understand this so easily when our best analysis failed?" Jack wiped his hands on his already stained shirt. "Because sometimes, the more you know about advanced technology, the harder it is to see simple solutions. You folks were looking for complexity, but the real genius of this machine is its simplicity." He pointed to various sections they had activated. "Look at how each part does exactly one job, but does it perfectly. No redundancy, no fancy electronics, just pure mechanical efficiency." Dr. Blue's skin pulsed with understanding, like the ancient water clocks of my world. "Exactly," Jack smiled. "Every civilization probably has something similar. Technology so basic it becomes timeless." He turned back to the artifact, studying the newly aligned patterns. "And I think I know what this thing is now. The way these mechanisms are arranged, the precision of the timing. It's not a weapon or a power source." "What is it?" several voices asked at once. "It's a maintenance system," Jack said confidently, "probably for the star itself. Think about it. What better way to regulate something as massive as a star than with a mechanical system that can't be hacked, doesn't need power, and can run for millions of years without failing?" Dr. Blue's skin glowed brighter as the pieces fell into place. "That's why it activated when the star began showing signs of instability, and why the energy signatures have been increasing." Jack added, "It's been trying to start up, but it needs manual help to initialize properly, like an old car engine that needs to be cranked before it can run on its own." He picked up his wrench again, a determined look in his eyes. "Ready for the final sequence? This is where it gets interesting." The alien scientists gathered closer, their earlier dismissal of the humans' primitive methods completely forgotten. Even their advanced sensors were now secondary to watching Jack's hands as he prepared to complete the activation sequence. Jack stood before the final set of mechanisms, sweat beading on his forehead. The artifact now hummed with a deep, steady rhythm that filled the entire chamber. All the previously activated sections were moving in perfect synchronization, like the inside of a giant watch. "This is the tricky part," he said, laying out 3 specific tools from his box. We need to activate the last 4 sequences simultaneously, or it'll reset everything we've done. Dr. Blue's skin pulsed with nervous energy. What do you need us to do? I need 3 people with steady hands. Jack held up his wrench. Each position needs to be turned exactly 45 degrees when I give the signal. No more, no less. To everyone's surprise, 2 of the senior scientists stepped forward alongside Dr. Blue. Their earlier skepticism had been replaced by quiet respect for the human's expertise. Like this, Jack demonstrated the motion with his wrench. Feel for the catch point. It'll give you a little resistance just before it's ready to turn. He positioned each of them at different points around the artifact. The patterns on the surface were now moving in clear, deliberate sequences, like flowing water guiding them to the correct spots. Remember, Jack said as he took his position, this isn't about strength. It's about timing and feel. Listen to the rhythm of the machine. When the humming drops to its lowest pitch, that's our moment. The chamber fell silent except for the artifact's pulsing sound. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the vibrations through his wrench. The other scientists watched their screens nervously as energy readings fluctuated. On my mark, Jack called out. 3, 2, 1, now. All 4 of them turned their tools simultaneously. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a series of perfectly synchronized clicks, the final sections of the artifact began to move. The surface patterns erupted in a display of flowing light, and the entire structure began to rotate slowly. New panels opened along its surface, revealing intricate arrays of gears and counterweights that moved with impossible precision. Look, Dr. Blue exclaimed. Her scientific displays showed massive changes in the local space-time readings. Jack nodded, watching the mechanisms work. It's calibrating itself to the star's rhythm. All those gears and counterweights, they're probably calculating and adjusting for stellar movements we can't even detect. The artifact's rotation picked up speed, but the motion was smooth, controlled. The threatening energy signature that had worried them for months was transforming into something else. A steady, stabilizing force that seemed to reach out toward the nearby star. The star's irregular patterns are normalizing, one scientist announced, checking his readings. Whatever this device is doing, it's working. Jack smiled, watching the ancient machine do its job. It's like a giant mechanical governor, the kind they used to use in old steam engines. It monitors and adjusts the star's output through purely mechanical means. No computers to fail, no power source to run out. It could keep working for millions of years. Dr. Blue moved closer to him, her skin glowing with admiration. How did you know it would work? I didn't, Jack admitted. But I've worked on enough old machines to know that the simpler the design, the more reliable it is. The ancients who built this, they understood that principle perfectly. The artifact had fully activated now, its complex mechanisms working in perfect harmony. The threatening energy readings had completely disappeared, replaced by stable patterns that matched the star's natural rhythm. It's beautiful, Dr. Blue whispered, watching the synchronized movement of countless precision-engineered parts. Jack nodded, already packing up his tools. Sometimes the most elegant solutions are the ones that don't try to force things. This machine isn't fighting against nature. It's working with it, just using simple mechanical principles to keep things in balance. The chamber erupted in celebration as the scientists realized the crisis was over. But Jack simply closed his toolbox, a satisfied smile on his face. He'd done what he always did, fixed what was broken, even if it happened to be an ancient alien device maintaining a star. Dr. Blue caught his eye and saw in his expression the same thing she'd seen in countless repair shops across the galaxy, the quiet pride of someone who understood that the simplest solutions were often the best. 1 week after the activation of the artifact, Jack found himself standing before the Galactic Council. The Grand Chamber, with its soaring crystal walls and floating platforms, made his oil-stained work boots and worn toolbox seem even more out of place. Dr. Blue stood beside him, her skin glowing with pride as she presented their findings to the assembled alien leaders. The device is, in fact, one of many scattered throughout our galaxy, she explained, projecting a holographic map. We've identified similar energy signatures in 12 other star systems, all showing signs of early instability. The council head, a tall being with crystalline features, leaned forward. And you're saying these machines were built using primitive mechanical principles? Simple, not primitive, Jack corrected, earning surprised looks from the council members. Few dared to interrupt their discussions. There's a difference. Simple means efficient, reliable, and long-lasting. Like a lever or a wheel. Some designs are so perfect they never need improving. He stepped forward and opened his toolbox, pulling out a small mechanical watch. This watch was made 200 years ago on Earth. It still keeps perfect time with nothing but gears and springs. No batteries, no computers, no quantum technology. Just good engineering. The council chambers filled with murmurs as Jack wound the watch and passed it around. Each council member examined it with growing interest, watching the tiny gears work together. What we learned from this experience, Dr. Blue continued, her skin pulsing with excitement, goes beyond just fixing one ancient device. We've discovered that the civilization who built these machines understood something we had forgotten, that the most advanced solution isn't always the best one. Another council member spoke up. But surely our technology is more precise, more capable. Is it? Jack asked. He pointed to the holographic display of the now-functioning artifact. That machine ran for millions of years before needing adjustment. It can't be hacked, doesn't need power, and will keep working long after all our fancy computers have broken down. Sometimes, the clever solution is just using basic physics in clever ways. Dr. Blue activated another display, showing the stabilized star readings. We've already begun studying the other devices we've located. But more importantly, we're rethinking our approach to many of our own engineering challenges. The council head nodded slowly. And what about you, Engineer Jack? What do you plan to do now? Jack smiled and patted his toolbox. Well, I've got an old tractor waiting for repairs back home. Though, he glanced at Dr. Blue, I wouldn't mind helping out with some of these other ancient machines if you need me. Actually, Dr. Blue's skin flickered with colors of inspiration. I have a proposal for the council. I suggest we establish a new division within our science academy, one focused on fundamental mechanical engineering. And I nominate Jack as our first instructor. The chamber erupted in surprised discussion, but Jack could see several council members nodding in approval. After all, Dr. Blue continued, what good is all our advanced technology if we've forgotten the basic principles it's built upon? Sometimes you need someone who understands the simple things to solve the complex problems. The council head raised a hand for silence. Engineer Jack, would you be willing to teach our scientists your perspective? Jack looked around the chamber, at all the advanced technology and alien faces, then down at his worn toolbox. As long as I can still fix things with my own hands. Theory's good, but there's no substitute for practical experience. Agreed, the council head announced. Let this be a reminder to us all. Progress isn't always about making things more complex. Sometimes it's about remembering what we've forgotten. As the council session ended, Dr. Blue walked with Jack back to his temporary quarters. You've changed how we think about technology, she said, her skin glowing softly. Jack shrugged, but smiled. I just did what I always do, fixed what was broken. Though I have to admit, this was a bit more exciting than fixing tractors. And to think, Dr. Blue added with a flicker of amusement, some of our scientists called your methods primitive. Nothing primitive about understanding the basics, Jack replied, patting his trusty toolbox. After all, the universe runs on simple principles. We just have to be smart enough to see them.